Essay number 37. Trying to make sense of your life is what's actually holding you back. You're doing it right now. Trying to connect the dots, trying to see the pattern, trying to understand how you got here, why you're here, what it all means. You're looking at your life like it's a puzzle you're supposed to solve, a code you're supposed to crack, a story that's supposed to make sense. But what if that's exactly what's keeping you stuck? Let me be clear about something. You should absolutely try to understand your feelings. You should trace your thoughts back to their origins. You should examine your beliefs and make sure they're actually yours and not just inherited trauma or borrowed wisdom. You should know what you value, what you want, what you're giving, and what you're withholding. But trying to make sense of your life, that's different. That's trying to force a narrative onto something that doesn't need one. That's looking at where you are and desperately trying to draw a logical line from where you've been, as if life is supposed to follow some coherent plot structure. When you try to make sense of your life, you're not actually looking at your life. You're looking at the story you've been telling yourself about your life. You're trying to make the present fit the past. You're applying who you were to who you are and wondering why it doesn't compute. There's a massive difference between using logic to navigate life and trying to make logical sense of life. One is a tool for moving forward. The other is an anchor keeping you in place. One uses grounded awareness to pursue what you actually want. The other looks at where you've ended up and tries to reverse engineer meaning from randomness. Here's what nobody wants to admit. There are questions about your life that don't have answers. There are answers that would only create more questions. There are solutions that can only be understood after you've lived through them, not before. You can't think your way to understanding. You have to live your way there. The best things in your life will not make sense. Not at first, maybe not ever. Love doesn't make sense. You can't logic your way into or out of love. Grace doesn't follow rules. Joy doesn't require justification. Beauty doesn't need explanation. These things exist beyond the realm of sense-making, and that's exactly what makes them transcendent. That doesn't mean you can't use logic to work with these experiences. But to fully experience them, to really feel them, you need to abandon the part of your brain that needs everything to add up. You need to access a different kind of knowing, one that doesn't require understanding. Think about the most meaningful experiences of your life. Did they make sense when they were happening? That person you fell in love with, did you have a logical reason? That opportunity that changed everything, could you have predicted it? That loss that transformed you, did it follow a sensible timeline? The things that matter most are magical precisely because they're mysterious. They have unknown origins and tangible impacts. They arrive without explanation and leave without permission. There's nothing to do but live through them and see what remains. But we resist this. We waste our entire lives looking for reasons to love instead of just loving. We need to justify our happiness before we'll let ourselves feel it. We need to explain our joy before we'll express it. We need to understand our path before we'll walk it. We use logic not as a tool for living, but as a shield against living. We think if we can just understand why things happened, we'll be able to control what happens next. We think if we can make sense of our past, we'll be able to predict our future. We think if we can explain our story, we'll be able to write its ending. But life doesn't work that way. Some things in your life will make immediate sense. You'll see the cause and effect clearly. You'll understand exactly how your choices led to your circumstances. But other things will seem to come from nowhere, seem to contradict everything you thought you wanted, seem to make no sense at all. Those nonsensical things, they're just as important as the logical ones. Maybe more important. Because they're showing you something beyond your current understanding. They're pulling you towards something you couldn't have chosen because you didn't know it existed. There will be experiences you understand immediately and experiences you won't understand for decades. There will be chapters of your life that will never make sense, no matter how much perspective you gain. And that's not a failure of understanding. That's the nature of being alive. Sometimes the entire point is to experience confusion. Sometimes uncertainty is the teacher. Sometimes not knowing is the lesson. What emerges from your confusion might be more important than never having been confused at all. Who you become in uncertainty might matter more than who you would have been with clarity. You may never know if you're meant to be in the city where you live. You'll never know for certain if you're with the right person until you've already spent your life with them. You'll never know if you chose the correct career until it's too late to choose another one. But you'll live in that city anyway, because you're there. You'll love that person anyway, because you do. You'll work that job anyway, because it's yours. Not because it makes sense, but because it's your life, and you can either live it or spend it trying to understand it. We keep trying to make sense of our lives because we're trying to see if the old story still works. We're checking if the person we used to be would approve of who we've become. We're looking for validation from a previous version of ourselves who didn't have the information we have now. That person you were 5 years ago who had such clear plans, they didn't know what you know. They hadn't lived what you've lived. They hadn't been broken and rebuilt in the ways you have. Why are you trying to make your current life make sense to someone who doesn't exist anymore? You're seeking comfort in what's familiar, even when it hurts you, because stepping into the unknown feels like abandoning the story you've been telling. You'd rather have a painful story that makes sense than a joyful experience that doesn't. You'd rather understand your suffering than be confused by happiness. But what if the things that don't make sense are exactly what you need? What if the confusion is the doorway? What if the uncertainty is the opportunity? What if the life that doesn't match your plans is better than anything you could have planned? Clarity doesn't come from thinking about life. It comes from living it. It doesn't come from understanding your path. It comes from walking it. It doesn't come from making sense of where you've been. It comes from moving toward where you're going. You can spend the next 10 years trying to understand the last 10 years, and all you'll have is 20 years of confusion. Or you can accept that some things happen for reasons you'll never understand, and use that acceptance as freedom to move forward without needing everything to make sense. A good life isn't one that makes sense. A good life is one that's fully lived. It's working with what you have, while accepting that you don't always choose what you're given. It's knowing that you always have what you need, especially when you don't understand why you need it. The universe doesn't owe you an explanation. Life doesn't come with a manual. Your story doesn't need to make sense to be meaningful. In fact, the parts that make the least sense might be the parts that matter most. Stop trying to make your life make sense to the person you were. That person is gone. They did their job. They got you here. Now your job is to live from where you are, not from where you've been. Your job is to respond to what's happening, not to understand why it's happening. Because here's the truth. You could understand everything about how you got where you are and still have no idea where you're going. You could have perfect clarity about your past and complete confusion about your future. You could make total sense of your life and still be miserable living it. Or you could stop trying to make sense of it all. You could accept the mystery. You could embrace the uncertainty. You could let your life be strange and contradictory and surprising. You could let it not make sense. The need to make sense of your life is just another form of control. It's the ego trying to maintain the illusion that you're the author of your story, when really you're just one of the characters. It's the mind trying to contain something that's too big for containers. Your life doesn't need to make sense to be beautiful. It doesn't need to follow a logical progression to be meaningful. It doesn't need to have a clear narrative to be worth living. Let it be mysterious. Let it be confusing. Let it surprise you. Let it take you places you never planned to go. Let it introduce you to versions of yourself you never knew existed. Let it not make sense. Because the moment you stop trying to make sense of your life is the moment you actually start living it. The moment you stop needing to understand is the moment you become available to experience. The moment you let go of the story is the moment the real adventure begins. Your life is not a problem to be solved. It's not a code to be cracked. It's not a story that needs to make sense. It's an experience to be lived, a mystery to be explored, a gift to be received, especially when you don't understand why you're receiving it. Stop trying to make sense of it. Start living it. The sense, if it comes, will come later, or it won't. Either way, you'll have actually lived, which is more than most people can say. They're too busy trying to understand their lives to actually experience them. Don't be one of them. Choose mystery over meaning. Choose experience over explanation. Choose living over understanding. Your life doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be lived.